Hey guys, LC Holt here, and this is my update for April the 22nd. I got a good show today. We're going to be talking about alien abductions. Joining me to talk about this is two of my regular buddies on this show. Zach Myers, how are you doing today, man?
Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going good. And Ryan Rayonec, what's up, buddy?
Doing your show.
What else needs to be said, right? So here we go. What we're going to talk about today are these alien abductions. And I thought it would be a good idea before we get going to give the audience some sort of an idea of what an alien abduction is considered to be. And we can talk about these few points here as I go through them. Now, this comes from the Center for UFO Studies. There's actually a center for it, all right? According to them, there are 4 different criteria to categorize something as an alien abduction. Number 1, a person must be taken against their will from terrestrial surroundings by non-human beings. Okay, so if you go willingly with crazy Uncle Mike down to the grammar school basement and he fiddles you, that's a totally different thing, not an alien abduction.
That's kidnapping.
That's kidnapping. Okay, so we're clear on that point, yeah?
Jaywalking in Vegas.
Jaywalking in Vegas. So here we go. Number 2, beings must take a person into an enclosed space, not terrestrial, which is assumed to be an alien spacecraft. Okay, so as long as the person assumes it's an alien spacecraft, meets that criteria. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, in this place, the witness has to be subjected to an examination and/or they have to communicate with said non-human beings. Number 4, the experience must be remembered either consciously or through hypnosis. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about hypnosis when we get into this first story that we're going to be discussing. Hypnosis is kind of an odd thing, and I'm sure we'll go into why it's an odd thing. But according to them, those are the 4 criteria for categorizing an experience as being an actual alien abduction. And again, that comes from the Center for UFO Studies. Now, the abduction narrative, as we'll find out through the course of these stories, is usually very, very similar. It pretty much breaks down as there has to be a capture, an examination, a conference, a tour, a loss of time, return, and an aftermath. Okay, so that's sort of the narrative that they talk about as being something that is common. Now,
Didn't Matt Damon make that movie?
yeah, pretty much.
That's how I remember the whole thing, like as you went through that.
Yeah, there is a. Now we're going to get into like the specific stories now. All right, I'm going to tell you guys a story, and then after the story, we'll talk about the story. Now, this is very famous. The reason this is famous is because this is the first widely publicized case of alien abduction in the United States. It happened in September of 1961 to a couple up in New Hampshire. I'm going to show you a picture of what this couple looked like. All right, now that there is Betty and Barney Hill. And they were a couple in 1961. He was a postal worker. She was a social worker. So he worked for the post office, and she, I think, just handled psychological type things, right? So 1961, they were an interracial couple, which obviously that was a little taboo for the time. But they are the subjects of this particular alien abduction encounter. Now, according to them, about 10:30, Betty they're driving through New Hampshire, coming home late at night. Betty looks out the window. She sees what she thinks is a falling star. But she says that the falling star starts to move upward, which, of course, falling stars tend not to do. They stop at a rest area to walk a dog. She looks through a pair of binoculars, and she sees that this falling star, which has gotten closer, is actually an oddly shaped craft. He thinks it's an airliner. He's like, don't worry about it, honey. It's just a plane flying through. Because he said he had colors blinking on it, like airliners do. It wasn't one solid color, say like white or blue or anything. It had little flashers on it. So get back in their car with their dog, which you saw in the picture there, and they start driving. The ship apparently starts to follow them. It descends toward their vehicle, so close that it forces them to stop. He grabs a pistol, and he's like, these fucking aliens, you want to mess with me? I'm going to show you something. He gets out of the car, and he starts walking toward it. He also has a pair of binoculars, same pair that Betty had. He looks up with the binoculars, and he sees these alien beings in the windows of this craft. He says there's 8 to 11 of them. They're humanoid. They got like these blue suits on and shit. And he says that in his mind, one of these beings said, stay where you are and keep looking at me. So he's like, fuck this. He yells to Betty over there in the car. He says, they're going to capture us, honey. And he runs back and he jumps in the car, takes off. The ship again pursues them, letting out sounds that they said were like beeps, a series of beeps and buzzing. And a buzzing that was so loud it rattled the car that they were in. Now, they continued to drive, and then something happened. At first, they didn't know what it was. All they knew is the next thing they could both remember, they were 35 miles away, and they had no idea how they got there. Okay, so that was the initial experience. What they did next, Betty, on September 21st, calls the Air Force and reports this thing. She kind of goes, beats around the bush a little bit because she doesn't want people to think that she's totally crazy. They kind of brush it off. After that, she has a series of 5 dreams in 5 consecutive nights. Very vivid dreams, almost like memories. One of the dreams, Betty begins to remember what happened in that block of lost time. And remember, that's one of the things I talked about in the alien abduction narratives. They generally have a section of lost time. Well, Betty and Barney had experienced this lost time together, and Betty is starting to remember it, or so she says. She says that the car, after the buzzing and the beeps rattled it, came to a roadblock, and that a series of beings that looked human but were not came out of the trees and got them out of their car and started to lead them off into the woods. And she said she remembered looking back at Barney, and he had this sort of like trance look on his face. And she remembers being led up a ramp into this ship. Now, she says that the reason she knew these people weren't really human is because their skin had a grayish complexion to it, and she says their eyes were totally black. Other than that, they were shaped and formed pretty much like a human being. Now, she had another dream of basically meeting 2 people inside this ship, one of which she called the leader, and the other of which she called the examiner. She said the leader led her into a room, and the examiner began to check her out. They started giving her like an alien physical, including taking a long needle and shoving it into her navel. And she said as soon as this examiner shoved this needle into her navel, that she screamed, and the leader passed his hand over her face, and all the pain went away. So she subjected herself pretty much willingly to the remainder of this examination, saying that they weren't really trying to hurt her. They seemed to be kind of trying to ease her whenever she was in pain or when she was scared. Now, she remembers after that them dropping them back off at their car at the roadblock, and then they got in the car. They watched the ship fly away. They got in their car and they started to drive away, and then that's where the memory picks back up again of them 35 miles away. Now, 2 years after this series of dreams, again, this was a widely publicized case, so that's 2 years of publicity as well. Barney and Betty Hill subjected themselves to hypnosis. And then Barney started to remember things, and Barney's memories weren't as pleasant as Betty's. Okay, they put Barney through the ringer, apparently. what they did with him, he said he kept his eyes closed because he felt like he was in danger and that he was being violated by these people. And there's probably a good reason for him to feel that way. He said they put a cup on his genitals and sucked the sperm out of there. And even worse than that, they took a chrome tube and shoved it right up his anus, otherwise known as anus, otherwise known as butthole. So that was not a pleasant experience for Barney, and he didn't really appreciate these people. He was like leader, examiner. They were rapists. So they dropped him off too, dropped him off down with Betty. And Betty's like, honey, didn't you have a good time? And Barney's like, hell no, I didn't. In fact, when they were driving back to town, Barney says he saw a light on the road and said, oh God, they're coming back. But come to find out, it was just a street lamp. Now, you have to remember that was 2 years after the event that they said happened. And this hypnosis was done by a psychiatrist who ultimately ruled, this was his quote, ruled the whole experience as a singular psychological aberration. In other words, what he thought happened, the psychiatrist, he says that he thought that Betty made up this story, and then Barney absorbed the story, and over the course of 2 years had convinced himself that it actually happened to the extent that he could recall under hypnosis this series of events. So basically, the psychiatrist that did the hypnosis was not convinced. Now, Barney and Betty, they both have since passed away. Barney passed away first, and then Betty died in kind of the early 2000s. So they're no longer around. But they certainly, there was books written about them. There were TV shows done about this experience. And like I said, it was the first of its kind that was widely publicized in the United States. So that is the story of Betty and Barney Hill. Now, this narrative is very familiar, and a lot of other stories seem to have followed suit in terms of, okay, we were driving in our car and we saw a light in the sky. So some people who are skeptical of these things say that Barney and Betty set the precedence for what we think of as alien abductions. What do you guys think about it? Ryan, what do you think, man?
I have my doubts. I don't know. It sounds like Betty might have just been into witchcraft and fucking got one over on her husband. You know what I mean? And maybe, you know, she used the alien story as a way to get out of it. You know, she's like, sorry, honey, but I put some shit in your ass. That's what I'm into. You know, you got to come out of hypnosis now, and surprise, now everyone thinks you got abducted by aliens.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
Betty was a bitch. God damn that Betty.
So you think that Betty is the cause? You think that Betty is the cause of this whole thing? You agree with the psychiatrist, don't you?
Betty was right up there with Barbara Bush on the witchcraft. Just.
I knew it. I knew Barbara Bush was going to come into this. Betty was Aleister Crowley's daughter, wasn't she? She was Barbara's sister.
Yeah, if we're gonna go into leaping 35 miles and shit, why don't we just go wherever we want? You know, it's a tough one. I mean, being alive, I'm 38 now. I mean, I've yet to see any aliens. You know what I mean? If I think a lot of our experience on Earth, you know, you could kind of look at as like maybe you know, how others look at things. It could be like an alien outlook on things, you know, where their outlook on life is like so different from yours, but are we still all human? I don't know, you know, but this story, I need a lot more, I guess, you know, when there's no evidence, you know, now we all fight over stuff when we have video, you know, now like you're talking the story in the 60s, there's no video evidence. It's just what some guy said. You got to take everything on faith. It's tough.
Right. Yeah. And according to them, there was some sort of evidence on their car, but there are no pictures of this that I'm aware of. And so it wasn't documented. So it might as well have not have even been there. I mean, that's the thing with all of these sort of stories. If it boils down to, you know, I got to take your word, there's too many people trying to be special, too many people that want something strange to have happened to them so they could get in the newspaper, say, for me to just take somebody's word. I mean, there has to be something. And I think is that kind of what you're talking about, Ryan?
Yeah, 100%. Like living in Vegas, the store, like you can't. There's nothing you can say here without someone trying to like top what you're saying. There's nothing. Like I'm serious. It's just one of those. Like I wasn't around people like this growing up, you know. So it's like to hear so many different, I guess, variations of people's bullshit over the course of just life. And I'm not saying there's not good people too that have accomplished great things, and I'm not, but I'm saying in general there's a lot of bullshit floating around. So when you bring it up to the level of I got abducted by aliens, it's a big leap of faith. That's all I'm saying.
What are you thinking, Zach?
Well, first off, the moment that Barbara Bush was brought into this, I was like, this is going to be the greatest chat ever. But yeah, I think I agree with Ryan a lot and you. It's the fact that there's not a lot of evidence. There's just not a lot of proof in the matter. And they had no markings on them. I read, was doing a lot of research for this chat. I read that a lot of people that claim to be abducted get this very odd scar on their body, and it's more of like a crescent kind of shape. And almost every single person that claims that they've been abducted has had this scar on their body. And I say that meaning there's no marks on them. I mean, the guy he got supposedly something rammed up his fucking ass. I mean, is there any proof that there was ever any assault right there? Was there any? I mean, just
Well, that's
saying.
the thing that it's lost at time is these things, because you'll read in books, say, about Betty and Barney, that there was an examination and that they had determined he had been violated. But we don't know that. I mean, there are no records that say that. And of course, if you're writing a book that wants to say that their experiences were real, you're going to say that. But it takes more than writing it in a book or just saying it. So I think the fact that it happened so long ago, we don't know if there was fucking circles on their car from the vibrations of this thing, like they said there were. We don't know that a doctor said that he had been whatever. We don't know any of that. We just have to take the words of Betty and Barney when they were alive, and then the books that have been written about them. And again, if the people who are writing the books are sympathetic to their story, they're going to say, well, yes, of course, all this stuff is real. Take my word. But it takes kind of more than that to convince.
I don't believe anyone named after cartoon characters.
Yeah, well, man, look, I don't know these people. They might have been really nice people, but I know that when somebody gets a taste of attention, it's hard to give it up. And they rode this train for a long time, and they maintained that it actually happened. And I'm sure they made a few bucks off of it. And hey, more power to them, right? Yeah, everybody's got to be the first at something. But that still doesn't mean that I believe it. And I do think that maybe future abduction stories just rode the bandwagon of good old Betty and Barney Rubble or Hill, But I don't know. I don't know. People tend to jump on wagons like that, and they want to be special. And I think we have another guy who's very famous that you're going to talk about, Zach.
Yes. I am going to tell the story of Travis Walton. Now, this is a very interesting story because this happened in Arizona, where I live. Now, I don't live where this happened. This happened in northern Arizona in a little place called Snowflake.
Snowflake. That has a whole new definition these days. Before you get going, let me show a picture of Mr. Walton, shall we? So the audience kind of knows who we're talking about. I tell you, that's a lumberjack if I ever saw one. So this was taken around the time that this event supposedly happened, right?
Yes. And he was best friends with a man named Mike Rogers, and they were all lumberjacks, so to speak. They cut trees down. That's what they did. And there was a group of about 5 to 6 guys that all did this. Now, they all worked together every day. They were best friends and everything. But Travis Walton and Mike Rogers were best friends. And in fact, Travis Walton was engaged to Mike Rogers' sister. I mean, that's how close they all were. And so one night, after they finished a long day of working, they were driving back home off the mountain. Well, they started seeing these really bright lights through the trees. And they were like, what the hell's that? Started driving towards it. It started getting brighter and brighter and brighter. Finally, they see this like craft thing up in the sky. And they're all like, what the hell is that? Well, Travis thinks it's a good idea to get the hell out of the truck. And he wants to take a closer look at this thing before it flies away. And they're all yelling at him, get the fuck back in, get in. And so Travis Walton walks closer, and this like beam of light hits him so hard, it takes him off the ground. And they all witnessed it in the car. It happened right in front of them. And Travis wasn't moving. They thought he was dead. So they took off. They hit the car in reverse, took off, and then they got maybe quarter mile up the road and realized we can't leave him. I mean, even if he is dead, like we got to go back for him and get him like that. So they quickly turned around, drove back. The craft, the light, and Travis Walton was gone. So they, not knowing what was going on, they called the sheriff. They kind of looked around a little bit, couldn't find anything. So the sheriff agreed that they'll come back the next morning and look. Well, couldn't find anything. Well, then the men, started getting interrogated by the police. The police were convinced that they basically murdered their friend and got rid of his body somewhere. And then used this whole alien thing as a cover-up. So some time went past. They all passed a lie detector test. Every one of the guys. All their stories were exactly alike. 5 days after it happened, Travis Walton appeared. And he did not remember much. And then more and more, everything started to kind of come into play. And he started to remember more stuff. He completely passed the lie detector test as well. But this is what his story was. That he woke up and these humanoid alien type guys were looking at him. The very, stereotypical what you think of an alien. And he said when they blinked, their eyes were so huge. And when they blinked, he referred to it as closing the blinds up and down on a window. Their eyes just went. And it was very bizarre. And he started to freak out, take swings at them, yelling at them to don't touch him, get away from him. And they walked away. Well, they left him alone in his room for a few minutes, and he left the room down this hallway and saw this chair with these knobs on it and stuff. He touched one, and this opening, the wall just opened, and he saw space. And when he hit another button, he felt like the whole universe just shifted. Like he felt like he was gonna fall. And it scared the hell out of him. He didn't want to touch anything else. So a man walks in that looks human with long hair and wearing a blue tight suit. And this man very calmly takes his hand and brings him into a room where there's other men that look identical to the other guy. All look human, long hair. He's telling them to please help me, I can't be here. And they're pushing him down onto a chair. And the last thing he remembers is them putting a mask over his face, like a gas mask type thing. And that's all he remembers.
Wow.
And they made a movie about the whole incident called Fire in the Sky. Now, if you see the movie or if you've seen the movie, it makes that alien abduction seem quite terrifying compared to what really happened from Travis Walton, apparently.
Man, I remember that movie so well because when I was a kid, that scared the fuck out of me because that movie portrays that he's really terrorized and mutilated by these things, and he's very conscious when when it's happening.
Yeah. What do you think about it, Ryan?
I don't know.
I knew that answer was gonna come. I don't
Um,
know.
I don't know. But it falls like right. That's the problem with all these stories. It's like no matter how much detail you go into, it falls right back to the same problem of yeah, anyone can make up anything they want to, or anyone could, it's tough. It's tough. It's really tough.
Well,
This
I
one,
mean, it's weird because this story, the reason why I say it's very interesting for me is
the lie
because
detector at the time, you would think there's less people knew how to. What year was this?
this was, I think, in the 70s.
I mean, you would think there's less people in the 70s than now that could, intellectually pass, a lie detector test, knowing they're
Yeah.
lying. There's only so many people that know how to beat it now, let alone back then.
Well, and
Um,
the crazy thing about this is my grandmother lived in Snowflake when this happened, and she actually knew Travis Walton and Mike Rogers. And I asked her her opinion one time, like, do you think that really happened? Her answer was no, but Travis definitely didn't act the same afterwards. He was very distant and very weird. His speech would impair once in a while, which never did before. But she said that she didn't really, ever see anything because she didn't spend her life looking up in the sky and seeing if there were. And she definitely wasn't in the woods, so she never really saw anything either. But she did say that it was the way those guys acted after that happened was quite odd.
you
But
said you said
again,
you said there was a 5-day period when they thought he was dead and then he came back. So 5 days, in the 70s, you're gonna figure no cell phone.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. That's weird. I don't know. Like, and I'm not even saying that because our pre-show jokes and shit. That's just a tough one to
Well, because they looked everywhere. I mean, Snowflake isn't the biggest place in the world. I mean, and they looked everywhere for him. I mean, they combed every inch of that forest and everything, the mountain, couldn't find the guy.
How
And
old
then
was he at the time?
what's that?
How old was he at the time? At the time, how old was
Oh,
the
he
guy?
was. I want to say he was probably late 20s, early 30s.
Oh, so he had a car, right?
Yeah, well, they all used to drive in the truck together, and the guy whose truck it was Mike Rogers, and he was in the passenger seat. And then when they pulled up and saw that craft, Travis Walton got out of the truck, and they were all yelling at him to get back in the truck and everything. And so about 5 guys witnessed him get hit to the ground by a beam of light that came from this craft. So pretty bizarre.
Well, let's say that this didn't happen. From the skeptical point of view, why would these 5 guys just decide to do this for attention? Or, I mean, this is a pretty elaborate thing. The guy goes missing for 5 days. You would think somewhere along the way, when they were being interrogated for possibly murdering him, someone would say, "Hey, we're just fucking around," but they
Yeah,
don't.
and
So
what makes me think about it is none of these guys wanted the publicity for it. They were all like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk about it. None of them wanted publicity for it. I think, and then, Travis Walton, for years, he wouldn't talk to a single person about, other than authorities, about what happened. And then finally, I think like 5 years later or something, he finally started, talking to people about what happened.
did he have any physical evidence on him of an examination?
He had a couple things. He had a couple marks on his temple, which apparently were small little X's that he did not have before. And he had a crescent-shaped scar on his abdomen.
Because is this, but the kind of thing that you could possibly do to yourself. I mean, it wasn't like he had like a black eye from a fight or something, but something that
Yeah.
suggested that the story was true.
Yeah, I mean, there were some odd markings on him when he came back that he couldn't explain right away, and that he did not obviously have before. The weird thing was they said the scar, if it was a scar and he did it himself, would have been there before because it was a scar. It would have been quite some sometime old, and he was only gone for 5 days. A cut can't heal that fast and scar over in 5 days.
Interesting.
So I mean, I don't want to go ahead and say that I think this 100% happened. But there are odd things with this story, unlike the other story.
Yeah, I would say I think it's better than the first story.
Yeah, there's some weird things to it. I mean, I can't explain all of it.
Interesting. Well, it was a very popular thing because they wrote a book called The Walden Experience, and then, like you said, they made the movie Fire in the Sky, which terrified millions of children around the world because they thought they were going to take a drive out in the country and get picked up and have these crazy-looking aliens throw you down at a table and cover you with spandex and vacuum seal you and then stick needles in your eyes. And I remember vividly what happened in that movie. Okay? Because that was freaky. Particularly the scene where the needle comes down and you see it going into his eye. I mean, yeah. And plus, when I was a kid, I watched fucking Unsolved Mysteries, man. I was always afraid of Satan worshipers and alien abductions because that's all that show was about. If I wasn't going to get abducted by an alien at night, I was going to be murdered by a satanic cult. I knew it.
Wasn't that the most perfect voice for a television show ever?
Yeah, and theme song. Like, have you ever heard the metal version of that theme song on YouTube? I'm gonna I'll link it down here in the description of this video, and I'll send it to you, Ryan, because it's like the most badass cover of a theme song I've ever heard in my life. Like if they ever, because they're remaking Unsolved Mysteries. I think Netflix is.
Really?
And they need to get the hookup on this guy that played the guitar on that metal version.
They gonna get Jordan Peele to do that?
I certainly hope not. But the thing is, you can't beat Robert Stack, man. And I think that this Walden guy, that was on Unsolved Mysteries because I recall seeing something about this on Unsolved Mysteries, the story Zach just said. But I definitely remember that fucking movie. Terrified me. But,
and it's a very odd case because I mean, like I said, with me personally, I've never seen a UFO, I've never seen an alien, I've never been abducted, so it's hard for me to kind of say, I think they're real. But this definitely has cases that I'm like, well, I can't explain that. And the scar is the one thing for me that's like, it's hard to wrap my mind around because anybody who has the scar did not have it before, and the scar doesn't heal that quickly. And they think that it's, I mean, the shape of it's not odd to me because anybody can just use a scalpel knife and cut that shape into them or whatever, but it's not going to heal that fast. I don't give a shit if you're Superman. Well, maybe Superman, but
it's a good thing.
No person can do that.
It's a good thing Travis Walton reappeared because I think chances are these guys would have been convicted of his murder.
They were. No, they were definitely going to go down for it, which is really that would have sucked because these guys were like, they loved this dude. Like they really cared about him. They were best friends, and they were just as scared about what happened to their friend. And then the whole time the cops are just like, well, you're gonna go down for murdering them, and they're like, kidding me? Like we're worried enough about where our friend is. Like now we're gonna go down for murder. It's just that would suck.
Well, and two, you have the thing about, his best friend who was in the truck is the brother of his girlfriend. So there's all kinds of things you could say about that, this guy.
That's why they thought that he did it was because they were like, well, maybe you didn't want him to marry your sister or something. And he was like, I don't give a shit. Like that has what? So that they definitely, but like I said, there was a lot of things about Travis that he was not the same for a while. And they think that his pupils were huge, and he wasn't on anything. They tested his blood and everything. There was a lot of things that about the case that they just can't explain.
Well, when you say the pupils are huge, part of me goes, well, you know, he could have spent 5 days smoking some weed out in a cabin out there somewhere that nobody knows about. But
No, but like I said, there was nothing in their system they would have found. And I think it was not really, it was right when they were able to kind of test a lot of that stuff in hospitals and stuff like that. And it was kind of breaking, you know, it was real big at the time and stuff. But I don't know. I don't want to be a dick and say that it didn't happen, but I also don't want to seem, crazy and say like, oh yes, yes, it happened. Let me get my tinfoil hat.
what were you saying, Ryan?
I say your pupils get big on acid too.
That's true. That's very true.
We love to take acid and go out in the woods.
Which part of the reason I bring that up is like you would think everything, like there's so many numbers in this world. Just think about how many people a year say were given LSD against their will. How many of those people reported to the police, and what were their stories? Did anyone hear about the story, make a book out of it? There's so many numbers for everything.
Well, and this is a little off subject, but go with what you're saying, Ryan. There's a cult, well, I'm sorry, a religion that about these Ryalians, and the cult leader says that he was in the woods and aliens came down and told him that he was Jesus's brother. And he said all of this happened while he was on LSD.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so
it's awful convenient. It's awful convenient.
It really is.
Well, if I take enough LSD, I can be Jesus's brother too.
Hey, if I take enough LSD, you'll be Jesus's brother. So. Well,
that's the story of Travis Walden. We have enough time to throw in one more story if you guys want to hear it. This is this is another famous story because, like the Travis Walden one, they made a movie about it. There was a guy named Whitley Strieber, and he actually is still alive. He does a podcast where he talks about this kind of stuff, and I suggest you check it out because he's a real interesting guy. But he's also a horror author. In fact, he wrote a couple of really popular books that were turned into movies. One you might think of is The Wolfen. Another one is The Hunger, which was a really good vampire movie directed by Tony Scott. Well, this guy, Whitley, wrote the novel it's based on. But he also wrote a novel about his own experiences that he said happened to him in a cabin in upstate New York in 1985. Now I'm going to show you a picture of Whitley so you get some idea of who we're talking about. That distinguished gentleman there is Whitley Strieber.
No, it's not Lois. It's Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Hey, just wait until I tell you who played him in the movie. Have any of you seen Communion?
No.
Okay, you're missing out. I'm going to tell you about this movie here after I finish with Whitley. Just wait.
Wow.
Okay, on December 26, 1985. This is what happened to Whitley. He was up there with his wife and his dog. He was up with his wife and his son in his cabin in upstate New York. Are you all right over there, Ryan?
He's making it worse, man.
I'm telling you, this is gonna be the best chat ever.
Okay, all right. I've got it together. Man. Whitley. Nice. Okay. So he's in this cabin. His wife and his son's there. He's really paranoid about people coming into his cabin at night. So he puts on an alarm system on in his house. Well, the alarm system doesn't work because one night he wakes up and there's a creature in his bedroom with his wife laying there. And what happens is he starts to be taken by these creatures. So some of them are what he describes as a gray alien. Others are little blue doctors. And if you've seen the movie, they look like characters out of Fraggle Rock. They're like these little blue guys that have robes and hoods on. And he's taken to some unknown location, which he will not for sure say is the spaceship. That's one thing he's really big about. He's like, I can't say that these were aliens that took me. All I can tell you is they were visitors. And that's what he calls them in his book and in his story, the visitors. And there are a series of different ones. And if you've seen the movie Communion, which stars as Whitley Strieber, Christopher Walken, then you would know how strange this is. It's like Christopher Walken. He's like, look, I'm laying in my bed one night. Suddenly I look up. There's a beam coming through. Wow. And then he's taken away. And this is the trippiest fucking movie you've ever seen in your life. Okay. Because there are all kinds of things happen to Christopher Walken in this movie. And this is from Whitley wrote the screenplay for the movie. So this is his coming from him. He said that the alien showed him the end of the world, that they showed him the death of his own father, that happened years before, that they revealed to him that they had been abducting his father and then decided to move on to him when he was a little boy. And that his paranoia about people coming into the house was actually caused because they had been taking him secretly since he was a little boy. And he started to fear that they were going to start taking his son, the way they had started taking him after his father died. Now, according to the movie and the book, these experiences never really stop. He just comes to terms with it. He accepts it as a part of his life, that these things are, going to be with him for the rest of his life. And at the end of the movie, Christopher Walken kisses a gray alien right on the face. It's touching. But but yeah, so that's the story in a nutshell of Whitley Strieber. Now, I certainly hope you guys, I'm talking about you guys on the show with me, but also people watching, will check out this movie Communion, because like I say, it's trippy as fuck. Like, it's a good movie. It's April 20th today. Do a little doobie doob and then watch Communion, because you'll enjoy it even more. Now, what do you guys think about this case? I mean, the guy is a horror author, and as a writer myself, I know I got crazy things turning around in my brain. Maybe you're having some dreams about it. I mean, when I hear the Whitley Strieber story, what comes to my mind is the phenomenon of sleep paralysis, because I'm not entirely sure that it's coincidental that most people see aliens, ghosts, or demons when they're lying in bed at night. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I, in my 20s, had sleep paralysis. And I never had too many hallucinations, but it is that feeling of like you're paralyzed. And a lot of people in these alien abduction stories say that when these aliens come into their rooms at night, they get the sensation that they've been paralyzed, which is exactly what sleep paralysis is. At least for me, it was, being in a state where you couldn't move. You were in kind of a pain because your body felt like it was entirely in pins and needles. And I actually had at least one hallucination while I was on it, a hallucination which you could call like an out-of-body experience. I could see why someone not looking at that from a skeptical mindset would think it was an out-of-body experience, because I felt myself, I was outside of my body in this hallucination during sleep paralysis. I floated along the bed, down across the floor, up. I saw myself in the bed, and I kept going up and up and up into the ceiling. And the closer I got to the ceiling, I started hearing these whispers. And as I started going up toward the ceiling, they were getting louder and louder. And as I started to pass through the ceiling, it was just all whispers. Like, only thing I could hear were people talking everywhere. And I was just entering a world of whispers, and I was terrified. And then the sleep paralysis broke and I was awake. Now, if I didn't recognize that as a dream caused by sleep paralysis, I might have thought I had an out-of-body experience. Because honestly, I thought I was dying from that hallucination. I thought, well, this is what it must be like. Maybe I was wrong.
Aliens tried taking you and just gave you back.
Who did?
I think aliens just tried taking you and then just gave you back.
Well, let's face it. Would you want to keep?
What if it's both, though?
Say again?
What if it's both, in the sense of like, okay, you justified it to yourself that, okay, this was from the dream, whatever. It didn't actually happen. However, what if when you go, that's how it actually occurs? Like, you leave your body, so like neither side has to be wrong.
No, I agree. I think that you might have an experience as you're dying, some sort of a vision or hallucination of you leaving your body. Like,
what if it's not? What if it's not, though? What if you just leave your body and then you're like fucked in like some Michael Jackson purgatory, like in South Park, and you stay there forever?
Well, I certainly hope that wouldn't happen. I don't believe in the afterlife, so I'll buy in as far as the hallucination until your brain is beyond until
Do you
the brain
do
damage.
you believe in reincarnation, or just you think that's it, just Sopranos ending for everybody?
No, I think it's Sopranos ending for everybody, man.
Huh. I
Yeah,
think.
LC's a real downer.
Huh?
Say that again, Zach.
Yeah, LC's a real downer.
Damn right, man.
Damn right. It just fucking goes out.
Even though
Yeah.
I kind of agree. I don't want that to be the case. You would think that you would want something in this world to be like, have meant something, but there could be the other outlook that, look, we're just computers, and when your hard drive shuts off, it shuts off, and that's it.
Well, that's my opinion, is the hard drive shutting off. Now, it took me a long time to get to that point, and I guess now we're kind of shifting from aliens to atheism. But yeah, I did eventually get to that point where I was just it made sense to me, because I had tried this religious thing many times in many forms, and I always had questions that were never answered in such a way that I felt like, how sometimes you hear something and you go, yeah, I buy that. I know that's true. I never had that about anything supernatural or religious. So the moment I gave it all up, it was like such a relief. It was like 1,000,000 had been taken off my shoulders. And now I'm far happier without the albatross of religion and what I consider made up stories around my neck.
Can you can you be just the same way, but still I am pretty much the same way you are, with the exception of I think there is a creator, in the sense, I don't know if he likes us. I don't know if I don't know a lot of different stuff, but almost nothing gets anywhere without being created somewhere.
Well, I
this
mean, there is
box.
that side of things where people believe that in a God who then abandoned everybody, that he's there, but he's just not listening. I mean, that is a thing. Yeah. Yeah. It's not my thing, but what you're talking about is absolutely something a lot of
I'm
people
not even
believe.
saying like a religion, like where you have to do X, Y, or Z, or feel like if you do X, Y, or Z, you're a bad or good person, or and you define yourself by that. Just the sense of I don't know. We came from something. I don't think it was I don't think it was an explosion out of a dot of nothing. I don't know. I'm going to
Maybe we
alien ant
came.
farm.
Maybe we came from aliens. Didn't the
I
last
came from a test tube.
Well, Zach came from a test tube. The me and you came from aliens. Well, you came from an alien. You came from an alien test tube. That's semen they took from Barney Hill.
Oh God.
Yeah, your mind just blew. Now, remember the last show we did, Ryan, about flat Earth? Didn't we talk about something like aliens being the start of everything, like that aliens put us here and something like that?
We could have. Time passes. Conversations happen. I forget shit.
Yeah.
Fucking car wreck, man. Fucking
Well,
brutal.
people do. People. Oh, people do think that, though, that the aliens are here. And some people, going back to this alien abduction thing, that they're just grabbing people to check out what their science experiments like now, how the progress.
Even if you go back to Adam and Eve, it would kind of make sense that we were all like someone else's reality TV show. Like they just had Earth. So if you have Earth and you're not going to inhabit Earth, that means we got some other place to go. And you put Adam and Eve down here, and then somehow dudes from Zimbabwe happen. I don't know how this shit fucking happened. I don't fucking know.
Well, we didn't like.
Aliens make a lot more sense than some stuff, because some intelligence in this world seems alien. It's like we have there's such a gap, I think, between like the lowest human and the peak of human achievement. Just certain people's intelligence could seem alien. I don't know. Who the fuck knows?
I don't know. I definitely don't know. I know that it's hard. This is why I'm skeptical about the alien thing. Going back to that is, you have to believe that these creatures, number one would be interested in us if we were so far behind them in technology, because obviously if they're here, then somehow they've mastered the ability to close major gaps in space in order to get to us, to experiment on us and probe us and do everything they did to poor Barney over there. So they're obviously pretty far advanced. So why would they care? I mean, if you go with the science experiment thing that we were like put here by in a Prometheus, a la Prometheus, you know, then okay, maybe they're checking on the science experiment. If you don't go with that, then why would they care about us here? And why would they want to experiment and mess with us? Personally, I don't think it's hard for me to make the jump to, okay, somebody has managed to get that far through space to get here, because we certainly can't get that far through space to get anywhere. But, you know, I don't know. I just can't reconcile it. I can't reconcile that there are. I think sleep paralysis.
Doesn't the Bible say though they're just into women and like this is where the women get produced? Like, I mean that's the most.
What,
like
in space?
No, I'm talking like the alien creation theory. Like, wasn't it just because like you know they were basically into chicks? Like, so if you fuck up Earth, there's no more chicks. And like this is the closest thing to reality I can think of. I mean,
you've blown my mind, Ryan. I have no idea about that. That the aliens are into chicks?
no, seriously though, because like if you're saying like you know why would they care about us, or if they didn't care about us, why wouldn't they just you know?
Oh, like Earth girls are easy.
No, not even. It has nothing to do with being easy. It's just that this is where they're harvested. If you fucking fuck up Earth, there's not going to be chicks.
Well, that's true. I mean, that sucks for us, doesn't it?
You're like, why would they care? It's like they like tits a lot.
Yeah, well, apparently they're sexless, so maybe they just don't know what it is. They're like,
sexless, but they rape everyone. This doesn't make any sense.
That's right. Maybe they see these holes in their bodies and they're like, let's see what I can put in this hole.
Wait a minute. I got something to say though. If they're so into chicks, then how come Barney got prison raped?
I was gonna bring that up earlier. You know what I mean? It seems like Barney, you know, he got some of those Hollywood aliens.
Well, Barney got the Corey Feldman aliens, I think.
His aliens were sponsored by Ellen.
Well, Barney, he was, you know, yeah, I feel for Barney. But yeah, maybe it is just that. Maybe the aliens are like, hey, we don't have enough holes. We got one little slit here and a couple big almond eyes. Let's see what we can do with all these holes these people have. Hey, here's a big chrome spear. We'll shove it up that one. And he's like, no, that's my urethra.
Yeah, this shit's too much. This is hilarious.
I think all three of us are going to get visited by the Men in Black after we're done with this.
Yeah.
About alien probing.
I think we're all going to get visited by the YouTube police after this. They're going to be like, you said what? Where? What did you say about Ellen?
What in the what now?
Did you call someone a snowflake? It's like, no, it was a town, I swear.
No, I swear I didn't call Corey Feldman.
All right, well, we've had a pretty interesting show today. We talked about Barney and Betty Rubble Hill. We talked about Travis Walton, and we sort of skimmed over Whitley Strieber, but his story wasn't really as interesting as the movie that was made, you know, the wow, Christopher Walken thing. But I really do suggest you watch the movie. We've kind of, you know, guys, we could go into this alien thing and talk about it forever. You could talk about UFOs, you could talk about creatures, you could talk about people coming into your room at night. There are so many different paths. You could talk about the Phoenix Lights, all kinds of stuff. And we'll probably try and cover some more of that stuff. But it's hard to do it all in one show. So we just tried to do a specific couple, you know, 3 cases. So next time, you know, we'll do a show where we can go into more of this stuff in a more specific way. But I hope you enjoyed this sort of a brief overview of a few cases and our opinions about them. And I want to thank you guys. Ryan, thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Fucking funny.
And Zach, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. And Ryan, you're funny as shit. So it was fun to do a chat with you.
Yeah.
Man,
Well,
you kept laughing in that one segment. You kid got me going. I mean, I couldn't stop.
well, you just got to go with it, man, when it happens. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you had a good time. And until next week, take care of yourselves.